And so Greg could hold up the book. I had to find out.
Which one?
This is the water book.
Oh, okay.
Greg's your Vanna White.
There was an anomaly. See, so this book was 10 years in the making because I kept researching it. And I said, this class of projects looks like they're really tapping into the zero point energy, and not it's just not a hydrogen combustion, right? That's moving the piston. You needed a little bit of that to make the plasma, so you needed that, but there's something more going on. And that something more was a ball lightning type event, microscopic ball lightning.
I lost you. What are we talking about? I think I know what you're talking about. I think you're talking about the electrolyte. No one at all knows what this is. I've talked with friends and family. You got to explain. We're talking about water.
Right.
Okay, you didn't say it. Go, John,
Water.
he's talking about running cars on water.
The top our news here at 6 o'clock, an age-old dream becoming a reality. A local inventor has discovered a way, hear this, to use water to run your car.
It's a major breakthrough that will no doubt make motorists happy. And as Ralph Robinson explains, the Pentagon is also showing lots of interest in this project.
Water has always been considered a precious commodity, but Stan Meyers' invention may make it even more valuable. He has developed what's called a water fuel cell. It has taken the place of his old gas tank. The water fuel cell breaks down water molecules into oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen is used to run his dune buggy.
I don't care if you use rainwater, well water, city water, ocean water. If you don't have any fresh water, go ahead and use snow. If you don't have any snow available to you, they use salt water because there's no adverse effect to the fuel cell.
Myers started working on this project 4 years ago. He's not a scientist. He isn't even a chemist. In fact, he never graduated from college. Myers was determined, he says, to design something to protect this country from oil embargoes.
Not only water, but we're not running it on the water.
Water
was
you do
a
with the water,
means
yes.
to get to the zero
Yes.
point energy.
All right, please explain that.
Yeah, I guess we're back to the slides.
Well, yeah, we have to explain because otherwise, you know, if you talk about these, so I have made one of these, so I've kind of went through the process. I just didn't install. I couldn't get anyone to install it in their vehicle.
And not all of them. Most of them will make just hydrogen, and that's not sufficient.
This is just
there's
water.
something you have to make something else in the water. There's something else going on besides making hydrogen.
All right,
from
yeah,
the
let's see the
electron.
technology. I'm interested in that.
Okay, while he's looking for that, is there an example of somebody who did it?
Oh yeah, many,
sure.
many. We've all three of us have met him.
That's been backed up scientifically.
Myers' invention was introduced in Britain earlier this month, and now the Brits have followed him here.
We recently took a scientific delegation to witness Stan's work, to really evaluate it, and came back saying, this is one of the most important inventions of the century.
You can see them. They have their.
did this, and then it's like
You can see him do it.
You can
Stan
see them
Meyers
doing
did
it.
in the
You can
90s.
meet them. You can meet them. You go to the
Right,
Tesla
and-
Tech. You go to any of these conferences.
All right.
There's semi-truck drivers who have multiple trucks. They can't afford the gas, so they retrofit them with these devices.
And what's the
So-
emission on that? Zero? If it is, why aren't we pursuing
It emits water.
There's a
Water vapor.
huge infrastructure
Then
in
why-
place.
You're asking the question we were talking about 15 minutes ago.
Exactly.
Not so easy.
No, it's impossible right now. It's impossible to get
better
this
than. Okay.
out. let's see the
It'd be
technology.
great if
Mark.
we all just got our dreams, but it's not. It's just not that easy.
it's-
There's a lot of forces we're fighting against.
Yeah, and a lot of people wind up dead when they try to fight it too.
Yeah.
Some
So
scientists.
Basically, I will say a vortex ring of plasma called a plasmoid is the key connector of tapping into the vacuum energy.
Can I just jump in and say a vortex is like a whirlpool,
Thank you, Greg.
for those that don't know.
Well,
That's right.
and then if it's charged, all the better. You get some interesting anomalous effects. And some electrolyzers, not all, were inadvertently making lots of these ball lightning events in the combustion chamber itself. So the hydrogen ignition helped make a plasma, and that plasma would convert charge water droplets that were very strong into vortex rings. And so basically, conduction band electrons are modeled as smeared charge clouds. They're essentially in thermodynamic equilibrium. with the 0-point energy. That's why normal circuits and things like that, everyday circuits, don't really exhibit excess energy. But if you work with the nuclei, they have steep lines of vacuum polarization, and these particles now start to exhibit excess energy if you start to jerk them around, move them around, make vortexes up of them. And so that was the key. That principle kept repeating and repeating and repeating for a wide class of inventions and observations in plasma physics where they're observing excess energy events and you don't know where it's coming from. But here's the flatland view of it. Okay, if the ions jerk or abruptly move, that little flux normally would come through at right angles. A little bit of it gets bent into our three-dimensional space, and now we're exhibiting excess energy. And sure enough, the ion acoustic mode of the plasma, gets us right back to T. Henry Moray. So this launched the explanation of what's going on in his device. He may oscillate the ions in synchronization. And so,
you refer to his device. Do we have an example of this device?
Not now, but at the time he made it. In fact, this presentation.
Is there any video on it? If it happened,
we're looking
in
for
the
the
60s or 70s.
We're talking.
Well, no, Moray's device was in the 20s. And we have still pictures. In fact, we're going to jump over to it. There's an example of it. Greg can show.
Has anybody remade this device?
Your picture's as good as anything in the book.
Yeah, in fact, this presentation, here's the original book by Moray and rewritten by John, his son, and it was based on essentially ionization. And did we have a repeat inventor? Here's another picture. Here's some more pictures.
Just to be clear, he's lighting up that bank of light bulbs with this energy source that he created.
Yeah, with the plasma tubes that he made. Yeah. Here's another picture. It caused my book to come into existence because I was destined to write this book. The inventor's last name matches my first name. And my book talks about the plasma tubes. It was actually in a patent, but we're not going to. You ask who's repeating it. And it turned out Paul Brown was working with the same. He was a popular speaker at the Tesla conferences and the other energy conferences, I think, back in the 80s and 90s. And he was killed. Actually, his car was sabotaged. And so he died in 2002. Boy, he warned about suppression. There was another device that he replicated, but it was basically the same idea as working with the plasma. And what he did, there was Hubbard. This is another interesting phenomena. Hubbard himself was the inventor that he was trying to replicate because this was a simpler device. Here's another picture of it. But Hubbard had a hell of a story. I mean, this is a kid, a teenager, right? I think 16 or 17, claims this was a revelation. It was given to him by angels. I mean, he had a heck of a story. He wasn't that scientific at all. All of a sudden, he comes up with this device, and the time frame is about 1919. That time, just before 1920, and T. Henry Moray gets famous in the 20s. So this was the other device, and this is before any suppressions, like one of the more famous devices. And the reason Hubbard got on the map is because he contacted a professor, I think it was up in Seattle, maybe it was UW, University of Washington, that got all excited and made press at the time that this exists. And basically it was working kind of on the same principles that T. Henry Moray worked. So Moray had to make his plasma, and he used radioactive material to make the plasma. It's illegal to get it, but he was working with salts of radium, Moray was, and Hubbard was doing likewise. He makes the plasma, and then once you have the plasma, you can start to oscillate the ions and make the ion motion. And so Hubbard had one patent using a radium tip spark plug just to predate the patent. So you could say perhaps Hubbard was the very first. He predated Moray, but it was approximately the same time frame. He got a lot of publicity and a simpler device. And Paul Brown patented the device, and he explained the device in the basically he made plasma and get the ion to oscillate. That was the same principle. And Paul Brown made it very clear in his patent how well he was doing. I'm just going to flash these slides. We need a little bigger here. So this was experimental. This is the repeat of perhaps one of the original ones, and we're not going to go into detail on the details. Other thing is working with radioactive material. And here's the actual picture of what Paul Brown built. And I said, I talked to Paul. He says, how many people are smart enough? You're using very weak radium. And he hit it. He didn't call it a 0-point energy device. He says, oh, I'm just making a resonant nuclear battery. I'm just tapping nuclear material. And but I said, your material's way too weak, right? And how many people realized that? They're trying to make a 5-watt device, and he wanted to make this really harmless sounding, and no claims of 0-point energy, no claims of excess energy. But I picked up on it right away. I said that material is too weak, and here I won't go into the calculation. That so if you got 100% of that converted mass to energy in that weak radium material, your device could not produce any more than a milliwatt.
So, Moray, do you think the radium acted more as a catalyst, or rather than being the thing itself? In other words, it caused other reactions. You needed it for that purpose, but it wasn't
radioactive. It's more active.
It ionized, the environment, the air, whatever, to make plasma. So you didn't have to put any energy in yourself to make the plasma.
Then where was the energy actually coming from, in your view?
The 0-point energy from the ion oscillation.
From the vacuum of space.
Basically, he repeated what T. Henry Moray discovered in a much simpler way. This is Paul Brown. He's also the first to ever replicate a historic inventor on this. And he wanted to go to the market with this 5-watt nuclear battery and explain it as nuclear energy. And I asked him, I've shared a cab ride back from the conference when he presented this. This is in the 90s, late 90s. I said, how many people are smart enough to even call you on this that are engineers? And he said, well, maybe if I'm in a layman audience, maybe 1 in 100. If I'm talking to engineers, maybe 1 in 10 are smart enough to know enough about nuclear science to realize that what I'm claiming is way out of bounds. It can't be done. He says, but that's the short answer. The long answer was this. I was actually trying to do better than that. We were trying to make, I think, 100-watt device with this, approximately 100 watt. It was unstable. We would have surges of energy, sometimes up in the kilowatts, that would burn everything out, burn it all up. So he was really stumbled onto a big effect. And he says, well, we can't, because it's unstable, we can stabilize it under 10 watts. And so that was their goal. And they would advertise, okay, this lasts a real long time. We're going to sell a 5-watt nuclear battery and duck below the radar, saying, oh, this is no magical thing. Everybody understands. Oh, yeah, you can bluff it its nuclear energy as your real source. And that was the goal. Their company intended to make money selling 5-watt nuclear batteries that would last for many, many years, right? Good for satellites, good for buoys. They had a market for it. You actually had to be licensed to even buy it because radium, they're pretty draconian on it, on doing it.
Moray, can I just throw in, just tell me if you think I'm explaining it maybe with the analogy you would use, but I like to use the analogy of a light switch. When you flip a light on, it's instant as far as we can see, but the reality is it takes a little time for all the components in the system in the circuit to readjust. And that's the point at which it's out of equilibrium. It's far from equilibrium, and so if we can somehow be flipping the switch on and off all the time, in this, as you say, an abrupt way, that's how we could create these huge peaks, these huge sparks that he was seeing. Would you describe it that way, or how
In
does that?
fact, what you described is the best devices to build safe devices, and you never build up too much energy. His problem was he was resonant and building up too much energy, and the device burned itself out. You couldn't get it stable.
Hey, if you like these kind of conversations and you'd like to see more, click like and subscribe to our channel. And if you're at the computer and you'd like to hear the whole podcast, click right here.